Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode review for The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 2. I'm just going to say this episode definitely is the best one so far this season. Really amazing reveals. Even though I was expecting the story to go in certain directions, it actually really surprised me because I didn't see how this was actually happening. And towards the end, I really did not see how a lot of that happened here. And I could totally see now how Carol and Daryl are going to reunite. I do think it's probably going to happen in episode 4. It might not be in the very beginning, maybe at the very end of episode 4, but I do think it's likely going to happen. And yeah, I'll give my thoughts on that, obviously, once I get into my episode 4 trailer breakdown, which will be coming out later on today. So obviously, before we go any further, this will contain spoilers for episode 3, and also make sure to be a subscriber if you want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. And so the episode starts off with the Madame Jana backstory, actually, and she's working at this place that, I guess where the Mona Lisa is, and the Mona Lisa is like a really big part to her story as well. And I watched the episode Insider, the actress who plays Madame Jana was saying that was a really memorable moment for her because it was just her and the Mona Lisa, and just to have that like one-on-one time in a scene like that was really cool. But yeah, I thought the backstory stuff was really cool. Honestly, like early Outbreak days in general on The Walking Dead are just the best. That's why I want a spinoff set around then. Like, I think that's the key to a very successful spinoff, to be honest, is, I mean, obviously later on you still have to make the story great, but if you're just starting a season 1, start the story very early on because, we get to know the characters that much better because we see what they were like when the apocalypse was first happening, and then afterwards you just sort of evolve into a different person or this and that, and I think it's easier to follow the story, So we saw that with Madame Jana here. We saw that she was working here as a janitor, and then everyone's phones are going off. There's alerts going off everywhere, and she doesn't understand what's going on. And then she sees her husband get bit by a walker, and then yeah, that's pretty much all we see from that point of view. Though we do see other scenes in general throughout the episode of how she decides to become who she is, and it's because they were trapped in that place for some time, and everyone else there, they kept trying to believe in something. Or the line she says actually that I really liked was, "Make sense of the chaos." Like people try to make sense of the chaos so much that sometimes there's no reason or whatever. And so Madame Jana, I guess in a sense, she lost her faith in that moment and became who she is now and became a leader. And it's funny because her mindset and just who she is in general, she is a lot like Carol. I think that they both, like as characters, just sort of started taking things into their own hands and doing things themselves. And I think that that's what started, I guess, who they are now to this day, right? So very cool backstory. I think seeing Madame Jana, in the early days of the outbreak and all that was really, really cool just to see what she was like in the early days, right, of the apocalypse. And it's so cool because you see what she's like, and we know what Isabel was like in the early days of the apocalypse, right, because we got that flashback in season 1. So just really cool, honestly. I think doing flashbacks to like the early days of the outbreak and stuff is just very cool. Like, I think they have to keep doing that. Honestly, I want Dead City to do the same, I think, for I guess any other characters that we meet there, like Bruegel as well. Like, he's a character that we're going to meet here in season 2, and so I think that doing a story there would be really cool. Honestly, like, this just makes me want another spinoff set around the outbreak time because it's honestly really great. Carol and Madame Jana meet, and yeah, very cool opening sequence. I think that the pacing in this episode overall worked really well. I think for the first 2 episodes, the pacing was, I would say, fine. The only issues I really had overall were in terms of Carol's storyline and how she got to France. It's one of those things where I think it's really tricky because, I mean, obviously you do want to show that, it's a lot to get to France. Like, she's just not going to get there that easily. But I think where they went wrong with it, to be honest, is the fact that she saw the plane immediately. I think I would have been, much happier with her. Basically, the end of the episode ends with, like, say it's episode 1, but it ends with her going in a plane and then leaving, which is what happens. Or maybe episode 2 ends in that way, right? Or maybe halfway through episode 2, she basically leaves, and then maybe a couple of scenes later, she arrives in France. I mean, that is you are rushing it there, but I think I would have preferred to see a lot more of how she found the plane and found a way to get to France instead of the journey, right? I think that's sort of my only issue in terms of pacing this season so far. But I think in this episode, the pacing worked really well, and I think that's one of the things, right? Like, you had to get Carol to France. Now that she's in France and she's really in this story now, I think the pacing is going to be really awesome for the rest of the season. And I think that's likely why, in terms of the early reviewers, talking about the season, they praise a lot of the later episodes, because this is the first episode that I was like, wow, this is a really great episode. And so, yeah, Carol and Madame Jana meet. Carol does see them doing experiments, actually, which was really cool. And there was actually a line by, I don't know who that was, but it was the person that Carol was with. But he says that, there's rumors that that's where the burners came from, which I thought was really cool because that was sort of an idea that I had in season 1, that maybe the burners were failed experiments. You know, they never confirmed anything in season 1. I just kept thinking, well, it makes sense. If they were doing experiments on superwalkers here and there, it just almost makes sense that, you know, they would actually be failed experiments. And so when I heard that line here in season 2, I was so happy because it basically, it confirms it, right? Like, the burners are failed experiments. And so, yeah, really incredible. But yeah, Carol seeing the superwalkers for the first time, that was really incredible. I thought that her reaction was just, was a very Carol reaction, right? Also, Sylvie wasn't dead. I thought that Sylvie was actually going to die. I mean, she dies in this episode, but like, I thought she already died, and then, you know, she would be a reveal or something like that. But no, she actually is alive here, and then she kind of freaks out because Laurent's not anywhere around, and so she's trying to look for him, and then I guess accidentally falls. And I will say, in terms of the set design, because they are filming in actual castles and stuff, I really like the way that the shots look, because you just have cameras in different places, and you're able to actually, again, like, because these are real sets, right? Like, you're able to actually have a camera look down at Losang when he's looking up at Sylvie, right? And actually feels like a real place, and that's what I really liked about that. But after Sylvie's death, you know, I will say I do like the way that they did it, because Sylvie, you know, I think, I mean, first of all, really great character. And I think if the Nest killed her, I mean, it would have made them seem a lot more evil, because they're not really like that. And I do like the fact that, like, they are, in a sense, a good place, but they just have this belief in Laurent that obviously is really, you know, dangerous for Laurent. So that's where Daryl and everyone disagrees with them. But for the most part, you know, like, they're not gonna, you know, kill you or anything like that. Like, obviously they did try to kill Daryl in a previous episode, but that wasn't Losang. Like, people actually did that behind Losang's back, right? So overall, the Nest, like, they're not gonna normally do things like that. And so, yeah, just the explanation for a lot of stuff here I really liked. You know, we saw Daryl, Falou, and Isabel arrive to the Nest. They climbed the Nest's walls, and I was really looking at that wall, and it made sense, like, how they would have climbed it. Again, this is like a real place, so I just like the fact that, you know, as crazy as it seems for Daryl to be in France and just that idea in general, like, everything feels very real. Like, all of this can actually happen, right? And so we do see the Nest ceremony begin, and yeah, really creepy stuff with all the music and all that, but the music is honestly amazing, really incredible. It's what I really liked about season 1, and yeah, we saw it here. Then obviously we got the Sylvie reveal, and I mean, I knew that was going to happen. I've been talking about it all week here in videos and stuff. Like, I just really figured that was going to be a reveal, that Sylvie was going to be a walker. I figured she was already dead, so I got that part wrong, but I knew that based off of the trailer, like, that looked a lot like Sylvie. So yeah, really cool. And Daryl shows up, though, and says, "Show's over." So I laughed at that part. Just honestly a really incredible Daryl entrance. Like, really probably the best Daryl entrance that I've seen in a really long time. He just shows up, takes out Sylvie, and then, yeah, a lot of really fun action scenes happen afterwards. And there's actually a really cool continuous fight scene that I really liked. Like, it was all done in one shot. I heard about this in some of the early reviews, and I was really wondering when that was going to happen, if it was going to be episode 3 or 4, but looks like it happens here in episode 3. Just really well done. And yeah, we go back to Carol, and she's asking if anybody knows an American, and then eventually she meets Caudron and tells Caudron that Daryl is my brother, and then Caudron tells Carol, I guess, where Daryl is. And I'm expecting Caudron to be a bigger part of the story for the next 3 episodes here, because he's been very quiet for the last however long. Like, I don't even know where he's at right now, but I just feel like at some point here, Caudron is going to show up again, because obviously we saw in some of the trailers anyways from before that, you know, there's a lot of footage of him outside and all that. So I do think at some point he is going to show up and be a part of the story again. Does he die at some point? Like, we'll have to wait and see. But he hasn't been a big part of the story so far. But you can sort of see that it seems like he is most likely going to be on Daryl's side, I think, eventually. But yeah, we'll have to see how the story works out. Daryl wakes up because obviously he gets held captive. And I thought that at this point here, like, again, that was sort of my prediction overall. Was I had 2 predictions here. Was that 1, Pouvoir was going to show up in this episode and take Daryl captive, or 2, I guess the Nest would just take Daryl and Isabel and give them to Pouvoir. But no, it was sort of a mix of that. It looks like Pouvoir is there and ready to attack the Nest and whatnot, but the Nest also just held them captive. For them being held captive, they're just going to be there. And then I think in in episode 4, they're likely just going to break out. Carol's probably going to save them, I'm assuming, because Carol's like right there. But the one explanation that I was really looking for here, and I think that we do have the explanation overall. And so this is a criticism that I've had a lot lately, and I was really worried about it. Like, I wanted to know the Nest's motives with Laurent. Like, if he became a walker after the ceremony, then what was their plan? Or I guess if he didn't become a walker and he was the cure, then what was their plan, right? Like, I just wanted to know more of what would happen after that moment here. And so we sort of learn that here in a scene between Daryl and Losang, where Daryl wakes up and Losang is trying to convince Daryl of having faith in Laurent. And obviously Daryl's just like, he's never going to have faith in that way. And Losang actually says later in the episode, he's like, yeah, no, he's too far gone. And Daryl actually says, like, well, what if he turns? Like, what if he actually becomes a walker or whatever? And Losang says, well, if he's wrong, then there would be no point in going on. And so the Nest just really believes in this, and they really do believe that, like, that's going to be what happens here. And I guess that is sort of, that makes sense. That is their faith here. And yeah, if it didn't work out, there would be nothing else. And so now my question is, if it did work out, then what? And I guess it would be just more to restore people's faith, because he mentions, like, their reserves are running low, and, obviously in terms of faith, and now people need a lot more proof. And so it just seems like that's really the explanation for why the Nest is doing what they're doing. It all has to do with, their faith in general. And so they just want to have power. They want to give people a purpose, and they all really believe that Laurent is going to, end, I guess, the apocalypse and all of that. And so that really is all it is. Like, if he does turn to a walker, then, at that point, everything just sort of falls apart. But if he actually is, like, the cure, and they're all going to be really happy and just have a lot more power, I guess, sort of in general, right? So I think that I'm happy with that. I'm really happy with that explanation overall. And I think that it makes a lot of sense. And you can really see both sides to it. Like, that's the Nest, right? But you have Madame Jana that doesn't believe in any of that and actually wants to create super walkers as weapons and, just, I guess, use them to sort of restore the world to, the way it was, or I guess sort of a new normal, I guess, right? And so you sort of see both sides of things. And Carol at one point is just like, yeah, I've heard that one before. So, yeah, because obviously they've been through this a lot, like on the original The Walking Dead. So I really like this episode because I think that it explained both sides really well. Like, I understand Pouvoir's point of view, and I understand the Nest point of view, like, entirely. But yeah, really incredible scene here. And then we see Carol trying to escape on a horse and then ends up getting caught here. And then we get this scene between Carol and Janae where Carol lies again. And honestly, like, I love the fact that when she told the story about, landing in Greenland and all of that, like, it almost seemed really ridiculous where Madame Janae just had to laugh about it. But Carol does lie again. She says that she wants to kill Daryl. And Janae is just like, all right, well, I can help you find Daryl. And, and once we do, I'll let you kill him, kind of thing. And so that was a really, honestly, really awesome way to get Carol, I guess, to reunite with Daryl, because I think that's one of the things that would be really tricky. Like, if you have Daryl just somewhere in France, like, just to have Carol run into him would be really hard. But I think the explanation for how, Carol's going to eventually find him makes a lot of sense. And now that Carol is actually outside of the Nest, I think it is likely going to happen in episode 4, because I think that in episode 5, if they went further away from each other, that just wouldn't make too much sense. So I think it is going to happen in episode 4. While this is all happening, though, we do see Laurent and Falou. They're in a cave and they're waiting for Daryl and Isabel to show up. And obviously they haven't showed up yet. And Falou does mention, like, we can't really wait here anymore. So I imagine they might go back to the Nest, or something else is going to happen and they'll save them, or I'm not sure what's going to happen there. But that was a good scene to see, because obviously we sort of know where they're at there. But I will say, for Laurent's storyline, they actually introduced something very new here that kind of tells me that I think he will be a character for at least the next couple of seasons, I feel like, because Laurent mentions that he feels guilty because, it made him feel special with everyone telling him stories about how amazing he is, this and that. And he just really lived in that. Like, he felt really special. He felt really awesome. And now, everyone's dead, sort of thing. Everyone he cares about's dying. And I thought that was a really interesting storyline here, because now he's feeling guilty about it, because that is something that, obviously he could have been a little bit more honest there. And maybe he didn't necessarily believe in all of that. And it seems like Laurent doesn't really believe in everything that, Isabel was telling him before, and now the Nest is telling him. Like, it seems like he is starting to be a little bit more like Daryl, in terms of his beliefs. And, I think he is starting to understand the situation here a little bit more. And, the fact that he's being very honest, like, yeah, you know what, that made me feel very special. I probably shouldn't have felt that way. I think I should have been a little bit more honest. And so really interesting, because I want to see where they take that with the character, going forward. But we do see Isabel. She's held captive now too. And Daryl and Isabel talk about, their future. They dream of their future together. And Isabel's last line there, really incredible. Honestly, I really want them to go back to Alexandria and have that future, or the Commonwealth, I guess. Like, you can just see that future. Like, it seems amazing. And it's really incredible because everyone back home in Alexandria or the Commonwealth, they have all of that, right? Like Judith, RJ, everyone, like they all are in school, you know, they're all living like a normal life. And Daryl, Isabel, Laurent are over here, obviously still sort of struggling in the apocalypse and all of that. And so Daryl mentioning all of this, it's just really cool because Daryl knows of a place that is very peaceful and where things could be really, you know, just awesome. And so like he's saying these things here, and it's crazy because we've seen this. We know that a place like that does actually exist, right? To Isabel, it's just a dream, you know? She's like wondering, well, like, what would I do? And then Daryl's like, well, you can go for long walks, you know, Laurent can go to school, you can do anything you want, you can sleep in late or whatever. And it just seems like really a dream. And you know, we know Isabel's backstory, and I have this feeling that she's probably going to die. Like, and it does seem like it's going to happen right away because I'm getting this feeling, and I hope that it doesn't happen, but I'm getting this feeling that Isabel's going to die in episode 4, and that's where Daryl and Carol are going to reunite. There's going to be something that happens around there, and they're not going to really meet, because I really wanted to see how Carol and Isabel would interact. I think that having those characters, you know, in a scene together and just, I don't know, the story just in general, I think would have been really, honestly, incredible. And I'm just having this feeling that we're not going to really see that. Like, I don't even know if they'll be on screen together ever. Like, I just feel like Isabel's going to die, and then Carol's going to show up, and then it's just going to be a different story. And if that does happen, I honestly do have issues with that. I think that, you know, like the way that they're setting this up here, you know, Daryl talking about this future and all of that, and it just seems like a dream. And, you know, obviously it just feels like something bad is about to happen for sure. And so it is really unfortunate. It's heartbreaking. You want that future for them, you know, at the Commonwealth or Alexandria, but it's just, I don't know. I think you could have eventually done that maybe in a season 3 or 4 if Isabel died then. But I feel like she's likely going to die in episode 4, and then Carol's going to show up, and then we're just going to have Daryl and Carol together. And that part I kind of find frustrating, because I would have really liked to have seen Carol and Isabel, you know, interact and just see that dynamic between the characters. And so I hope that she doesn't die, but I'm just getting that feeling that she's likely going to die just because of the way their story ended here in episode 3. But the very ending of the episode, we see Madame Janae arrives to the nest, and she's about to create super walkers that run towards the nest because, I mean, I'm assuming anyways, based off the trailer, it seems like that's exactly what's going to happen. And so they take Carol into that group of people. They're going to turn Carol obviously into a super walker. I mean, we know that that's not going to happen. So I'm really excited for this. I think episode 4 is going to be really incredible. You know, in terms of predictions, I'll get into that more in my episode 4 trailer breakdown, but it really feels like so much stuff is going to happen here. Episode 4 is supposed to be one of the best episodes of the season. It's episode 4 and episode 6 is everyone's favorites. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see, I guess, where this goes overall here. But anyways, I'm going to leave it here. Definitely post all your thoughts down below. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.